Which kettlebell swing do you guys think is correct? Is it number 1? Is it number 2? Or is it number 3? Now, before we dive into which one is actually correct, it's important to fully understand what the purpose of the kettlebell swing is. Why are we even doing swings? And then secondly, what muscles are we actually targeting with the kettlebell swing? First and foremost, the kettlebell swing's primary purpose is to build explosive power. So explosive hip extension to improve conditioning and to improve endurance. We are primarily targeting the posterior chain with the kettlebell swing. So a lot of hamstrings, some glutes, and some lower back. All right, guys, variation number 1 is not 100% incorrect, but there are a few things that I don't like about it. Number 1, and I see this all the time with people doing swings, they're looking down in between their legs. It's not safe to put yourself in this position, especially when you're really, really fatigued, especially too for someone that's brand new to doing kettlebell swings. We don't want to teach someone to look between their legs. It can very easily pull them out of position, round the back, and make them more susceptible to injury. The second thing I don't like about it is that there's not a lot of aggressive hip extension. So it's certainly working some endurance. There's a good hip hinge here, but I don't like how there's not aggressive hip extension, so we're not building a lot of power with variation number 1. As I'm sure a lot of you have guessed, variation number 2 is the incorrect variation for 2 main reasons. Number 1, we are in a squat pattern, not a hip hinge. So chest is very, very upright. There's a very small angle in the hip, so we can't drive as much power as possible through the hips with such a small angle. We need more of an angle in the hip to really maximize our power output. And then secondly, straight arms lifting the kettlebell to eye level. So we're making this a quad and shoulder exercise as opposed to a hamstring, glute, and lower back exercise. Variation number 3 is the most ideal variation in my opinion. So we're working explosive hip extension for that power, still working endurance, really good hip hinge. Also notice my positioning. I'm not looking down in between my legs. I'm looking down and in front of my body, which is keeping my spine nice and neutral throughout. I'm in a stronger, safer position, building more power while still building that endurance. Now let's break down proper technique so you guys can master the kettlebell swing as quickly as possible. So first things first, you need to understand that hip hinge. We don't want to be squatting with our swing as I showcased in variation number 2, hip hinge. So butt goes back, slight bend of the knees. You should really feel those hamstrings stretching and engaging. Back stays nice and straight. So you guys can pretend like you have a kettlebell in hand and just do a few hip hinges. Make sure you fully understand that position before you start picking up your kettlebell. Next, I want the kettlebell about 10 to 12 inches in front of the body. Feet are gonna be a little more than shoulder width, and this can vary depending on the individual, how mobile your hips are. Some people might need to be a little bit wider. Some people can be a little more narrow and get away with it. Find a good distance. Obviously, we don't wanna be out here, but a little more than shoulder width is a good place to start. From here, we're gonna hinge at the hips. So going to that hip hinge, hinging at the hips, reaching down to grab our kettlebell. We're then gonna pack our lats. So we're gonna pull our lats down and back, and we're gonna tip the kettlebell towards us. Next up, you're gonna get familiar with the kettlebell hike. So we're gonna be pretending like we're hiking a football in between our legs. We tip the bell, we pack the lats, we're gonna hike, so we're gonna pull that kettlebell in between the legs, making sure that our forearms are in contact with the thighs, and we're keeping that kettlebell high in the crotch. We don't wanna hike down low, which is gonna pull us out of position. Hike high into the crotch. So rep this out until you get very comfortable with the kettlebell hike. Next up, you're gonna be drilling the kettlebell hike to swing. So we're starting off, we're hinging at the hips, we're gonna grab that bell, tip it, we're going to that hike position. So forearms are against the thighs, high in the crotch. We're gonna aggressively extend our hip. So aggressively extend your hip, lock your legs out. It's okay to lock your legs out. I've seen tons of comments over the years of people like, oh, you're gonna get hurt locking your legs out. The body's designed to lock out. We certainly don't want to hyperextend, but it's totally fine to be locking the legs out and aggressively extending that hip. We don't want to overextend, just bring those hips to neutral. That power from the hip extension is going to propel that bell up. So arms are relaxed. We're not pulling the bell up with our arms. Arms are slightly bent, just guiding that kettlebell up. We then ride the kettlebell back down to the high crotch position, forearms against the thighs. We then lower back down to the ground and repeat. So rep this out. Make sure you guys have mastered the kettlebell hike to swing. Once you guys have mastered the kettlebell hike to swing, you're ready for some continuous kettlebell swings. Now, important things to note here. I always want you guys starting with very, very light weight and really master the technique before you start increasing the weight and increasing the intensity. Number two, I want you to let that weight pull you back down into your hip hinge. So after we aggressively extend the hip, there's gonna be a second of weightlessness at the top. That bell's gonna start to come back down. Let that bell pull you back down into position, making sure the forearms stay high in the crotch and they're against the thighs in that hip hinge position. And then lastly, make sure you guys are looking down and in front. Remember, I don't want you guys looking down between the legs, and I don't want you looking up either. So we get into position, you tip that bell, pack the lats, hike the bell, aggressively extend the hip, let that weight pull you back down into that hip hinge. If you're looking to apply what you've learned today in today's video into an actual workout, check out this follow along workout. I guide you through the entire workout. We do a bunch of swings in this workout, really good caloric burn, fast and effective that you can get done anywhere at any time. Until the next video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys soon.